All right, let's dive into a story about how a kingdom can completely fall apart, not from an outside attack, but from the inside out. We're looking at the reign of King Jehoram of Judah. It was a pretty short rule, only 8 years, but wow, it is a masterclass in what happens when a leader compromises on their core values.
I mean, it sounds like something out of a political thriller, right? But this is the big question the ancient text of 2 Kings basically asks us. Can a single marriage, one political alliance, really be the thing that unravels an entire nation? Well, as we're about to see, the answer is complicated and way more relevant than you might think.
Okay, so first things first. We need to get the lay of the land. Jehoram didn't just pop up out of nowhere. The kingdom he took over was already caught in this tangled web of politics and really dangerous alliances. To understand why he fell, we have to start there.
Now, this timeline is super important because it grounds us in a very real, very specific moment in history. Notice how the writer is careful to sync up the kings of Judah and Israel. These two kingdoms, which used to be one big nation, are now split, but they are tangled up in some serious drama. And the alliance that connects them was actually set up by Jehoram's dad, a good king named Jehoshaphat. He probably meant well, you know? But this alliance, it's about to go catastrophically wrong.
Just 8 years. That's it. It's a really short time to be on the throne. But don't let that fool you. The amount of damage done in these 8 years would have consequences for generations. And he's ruling from Jerusalem, the very heart of the covenant nation. But his loyalty? Yeah, that's a whole other story. So what was the problem? What was the root cause of the whole collapse? The text doesn't point to some bad political move or a military mistake. Nope, it gives a very specific and much deeper reason for why everything went so sideways. And boom, here it is. This verse is basically the smoking gun. The writer couldn't be more clear. It's cause and effect. Why did Jehoram do evil? Because the daughter of Ahab was his wife. This isn't just a fun fact for his biography. This is the theological key to the whole crisis. He married into the family of King Ahab and the infamous Jezebel, rulers who literally tried to replace the worship of God with state-sponsored Baal worship. So here's the bottom line. That marriage contract had some serious fine print. It wasn't just a treaty to keep the peace. It was a spiritual invasion. All the corruption, the Baal worship, the total rejection of the covenant that defined the house of Ahab, it was all imported wholesale, right into the royal palace in Jerusalem. For Judah, being faithful to God wasn't just a religious thing. It was the bedrock of their entire national identity. And this marriage took a sledgehammer to that very foundation.
So what happens when you hollow out the spiritual foundation of a nation? Well, everything built on top of it, the politics, the military, it all starts to shake. The consequences of Jehoram's choices weren't abstract. They were real, they were fast, and they were absolutely devastating.
This is really the critical question the story forces us to ask. The text draws a straight line. The king abandoned the covenant, and then the kingdom itself started to fall apart. First, the enemies on the outside saw their chance, and then the rot started from within.
The collapse starts at the borders. Edom, a nation that Judah had controlled for more than 100 years, just says, "We're done," and successfully revolts. This is a huge hit to Judah's power and reputation. Jehoram's big response? A pathetic little night raid where he barely escapes with his army. He doesn't win back a thing, the land is gone, the authority is gone. It's a total failure.
And just when you think it can't get any worse, guess what? It gets worse. Look at this. Libnah, a city of priests inside Judah's own territory, also revolts. This is a complete disaster. When your own spiritual leaders are rising up against you, this isn't a political problem anymore. It's a theological meltdown. The moral core of the nation is rejecting its king. At this point, the kingdom is on the edge of oblivion. Honestly, by all rights, Judah should have been completely destroyed, wiped off the map. But then, the author drops a single verse into the story that changes everything. It pivots from total human failure to something else entirely. This one sentence is the hinge on which the entire story turns. In spite of Jehoram's absolute betrayal, the kingdom doesn't get destroyed. And why? It has nothing to do with Judah's behavior, which was terrible. It has everything to do with a promise God made generations before to King David. The nation is saved by God's faithfulness, not by their own merit. And that promise is called the Davidic covenant. A great way to think about it is like a theological firewall. It's this unconditional promise that basically protects David's family line from being totally wiped out, even when a king like Jehoram does everything he can to deserve it. Judah is spared not because of what it's doing now, but because of a promise made in the past.
So while the kingdom itself squeaks by, Jehoram doesn't escape the fallout. The story wraps up by giving us the final verdict on his short, disastrous reign and the dishonorable legacy he leaves behind.
The text actually mentions the official state records, the Book of the Chronicles, and says, you can go look there for the rest of his deeds. But the Bible isn't just a history book that lists events, it's an interpretive one. It doesn't care about his tax policy or building projects, it focuses on what's spiritually significant. And in Jehoram's case, his entire legacy gets boiled down to failure, betrayal, and loss.
And so, after 8 ruinous years, Jehoram's reign is over. He's buried in the city of David, yes, but the text makes a point to tell us it was without honor, a final judgment on his leadership. His son inherits a kingdom that's smaller, weaker, and spiritually bankrupt. The Davidic line survives, but man, it is hanging on by a thread, kept alive only by grace, not by the actions of its king.
And that brings us to our last thought, the question this whole story leaves us with. What's more fragile, a nation's borders or the beliefs that hold that nation together? Because if this ancient account teaches us anything, it's that once a people's core beliefs are betrayed, the borders themselves probably won't stand for very long.